Should be good.
Cool. Okay. All right. Thanks, Tim. All right. So welcome to Vancouver Creative Tech. I think this will be a very exciting, interesting presentation today. Definitely a topic we haven't really touched on that much before. So I think hoping to learn a lot. Just a few things before we get started. Vancouver Creative Tech is a group of community coders and makers. We run the meetup once a month, usually the last Tuesday of every month, starting at 7 p.m. For those just joining, it's a mixture of talent that's in the Vancouver area, but also talent around the world that do all sorts of interesting things from, creative code, installation design, motion graphics, everything in between. I've been running it about over 6 years now with my co-organizers, Tim and Omar. And yeah, we're looking forward to expand the reach and breadth of talent to come share their knowledge with us. So without further ado, Tim, usually what we do is we post our social links in the chat, and that's where you can follow us on Meetup, Facebook. We have a Slack group you can join. And also, if you like what we talk about and you want to see more, you want to support us, you can always drop us some cash in the PayPal link that's listed there as well. So thanks, Tim, for posting all those things. Yeah, and so basically we're going to have a presentation by Joel, and following that, we're going to kind of have a discussion about the topic today, which is show control systems, and then we'll open it up to questions. And so feel free to either, raise your hand and just kind of jump in, or if you'd prefer, you can type in the chat your questions, and we'll see if we can get to them as well. So introducing our main presenter of the night, Joel Grink, is, how do you say your name, first of all?
Joel Grinke.
Grinke, perfect.
Grinke, the E gets people. It's that weird bastardized German that'll get you.
That's awesome. Joel Grinke is here to talk about show control systems. Joel, I'm sure you can do a bit of a background about yourself and some of your professional history, but he's accomplished in a lot of different areas, a lot of different topics. And yeah, tonight, learning about durability and telling compelling stories with show control systems and themed attractions. Take it away, Joel.
Hello, amazing. All right. Well, I'm going to first, let's just do this well-rehearsed move that I tried not 10 minutes ago now. Here we go. I'm going to press that button and I'm going to hit play. Ooh, we did it. Nice. So I'm here. I'm going to talk about show control systems for long-term installations. But first, I'd like to tell you a little story, and I promise it's going to be quick. So when I was 25 years old, I had just come off of touring North America with a show for young people. I was an actor at the time. And I got home from touring and I was super bummed out because I did not like the acting lifestyle, and I'd gone to school for it and I thought that was the future, and oh man, I know what I'm doing. But it wasn't. It totally wasn't. I had no idea what I wanted to do with my life, as one does at 25 years old. And so my brother, a very wise guy, said, hey, you know where we should go? We should go to Disneyland. There is no way that you can be bummed out at Disneyland. So awesome. So we got together. We spent 6 months planning. We decided that we would be learned in everything about Disneyland. We watched all the animated features. We learned all about kind of Imagineering and how Walt had sort of founded the industry of theme parks a little bit. And we went. And there's a main drag called Main Street USA. You go into Disneyland, and it's kind of the first thing that you see. And I was like, wow. And it had been a while since I'd been. It had been a while. And like I'd gone when I was 12, 13, I think, most recently. So anyways, so we were walking around and we go, and I'm like, wow, this is really cool. This is I wonder if these guys know that they're doing theater, that they're doing performance. And of course they do. And of course they do. But I was 25 years old, walking around being like, wow, I wonder if they know that they're doing theater. And then I saw that there were consistent times of days where things would happen and shows would happen and experiences would happen, and they would just go. And then at night there was the fireworks and the performances. And this is the picture we're looking at is from a show called Fantasmic that happens on the Rivers of America, they're called. So anyways, I came out of that trip going, oh my gosh, I know what I want to do. I don't know how I'm going to do it, but I think I've got a pretty clear vision of what this thing is, and that is themed attractions and themed entertainment design. And so that has been sort of the driving force of my life for the past for almost 10 years now. So you can certainly call it a transformative experience, and that is the story of why I really believe in the transformational possibilities of themed attractions and automated performances. I've started to call it a little bit and seen other people call it, and why I really want to help make it a bigger thing in the world. So that's my story. So today I want to talk about themed attractions and the systems that we can use to make sure that we deliver them consistently every time, so that guests get a consistent experience, no matter when they come and no matter who they are. And all that to say, as Darren pointed out, this is going to be a discussion. I'm not going to spend a lot of time talking, hopefully. I'm watching my clock here. And I'm happy to kind of go in all kinds of different directions. Like I love talking about the main gist of this presentation is going to be about kind of control systems and ways that I attack them. But also I'm all about, like, my goal in life is how can we make almost anything into a theme park, and how can we all do all of these things. So those are some things that I would love to put into your mind to think about as I talk a little bit. Yeah. So themed, what's that? When I think about themed at this point, I don't just think about theme parks. I actually think theme parks are becoming a smaller and smaller piece of the puzzle. I think that there's some really interesting work that can be done in retail experiences. Apple, I think, very famously sort of pioneered this a little bit about what they do. What was that, 20 years ago when they opened their first Apple store at this point? And then pop-ups are obviously a huge piece of theming. Attractions like Wings and Wizards, which is running in Vancouver right now, and we're going to talk about that, and Fly Over Canada, shows, of course. And then I think, and architecture is a really nice way of doing theming. And we're actually going to talk about those bottom three. I'm going to give 3 different examples of work that I've done. So there we are. So here's a little bit of work that I've been lucky enough to be part of in the past little while. So my professional history, so thinking about after I stopped being an actor and started being like, well, how can I do this themed attraction? I started doing a lot of design for theater, and then that turned into doing, what ended up happening is I would write a show, and I'd be like, well, the audience member wants to walk around, and then this will happen and this will happen. I couldn't really find anybody who could help me execute those things. So I ended up writing a lot of show control systems, and that ended up leading me to a company that's based here in Vancouver called EOS Light Media. They do a ton of installation work for various retail spaces. Museums is where they really got their start. Themed attractions, which, as I've just said, is a pretty broad term, but that's the term they end up using. Architecture, all kinds of stuff. So this is a little bit of work that I've done with EOS Light Media. So like if you look down in the bottom right-hand corner here, this is a motion simulator where you're riding down a mine, at this museum in Nova Scotia that is managed by a single person. There's a single person on staff there. So you can imagine that that's a pretty complex system there that needs to run on its own. Lights of Hope up in the top right-hand corner. This year, we added something new to it. We added that video screen first time they tried it, and it needed to be, and the system is based in a hospital. So I'm sure you can imagine that it's tricky to get into a hospital to do maintenance on a system like that. So can't be going in. And this one over on the left-hand corner, on the left-hand side, I'm going to talk about in a little bit. And then I've gone and started my own little immersive design company called Sea to Sky Immersive. And we've done a number of experiences so far, and hoping to do more and more as we go ahead. So let's talk about, so the thing that I always thought about when I moved out of acting is I don't want to show up after opening. That's what I learned. I don't love showing up after opening. And this is and this to me is the driving force of what we're going to talk about tonight. So first of all, I want to talk about Wings and Wizards. Has anybody gotten a chance to go see Wings and Wizards in over at BC Place yet? I'm going to quickly look at it.
Not yet, but I'm hoping to next week.
Awesome. So Wings and Wizards is a really neat experience over in BC Place. And it has a few pretty specific things that need to happen. So because COVID, everything had to be spaced out. This can't really be like a free roaming experience. But the folks at Go2 had built out these really nice little interactive experiences that you wave your wand, you do different things with your wand, spoilers, and things happen. But we need to keep the whole thing moving every 3 minutes and 45 seconds. And every 3 minutes and 45 seconds, the whole room has to reset and be back at its first state, so that it's the exactly same story and exactly same experience for the next audience member, as well as taking those inputs from interactives, which are going to be totally different each time. So what was really neat about Wings and Wizards is that you've got these two things that are sort of working against each other. One is this firm timeline. Actually, somebody recently referred to it as kind of like a video game that is on a track where you get to run around for a little bit, but then it hits a cutscene. But you get that little bit of interactivity while you're running around. So what we did here, and I'm going to talk a little bit about software here. What I will tend to do for this kind of work is, as much as possible, minimize the amount of custom software. And I'll do that because at the end of the day, I want to be able to hand something off to somebody else who can troubleshoot it. And if there's a manual, it's way easier to troubleshoot than if there's not a manual. And I've made it's a whole bunch of code that I've done in the background. Not to say that custom coded stuff isn't very useful, because that's what all the Go2 guys were doing. It's all about how can it talk to each other. So for example, in Wings and Wizards here, and you're going to notice a theme here, what we do is I've got a app that I love that's called QLab. And QLab's actually, that is pulled back from my theater days. And QLab's really good at just stacking queues, just stacking events that need to happen at a certain time, in a certain order. It can send UDP messages out over the network, and it can send OSC messages over the network. And as long as that is at the head, I think you're gonna notice, I always put it at the head of the system, and that's gonna make sure that everything works. I also have a little bit of a touch designer patch. You'll notice in the photo here, I've got QLab is the one with the big bright squares, and then it has a little bit of a touch designer piece to it. That was because we're using DMX lighting control for lighting and for the interactives. The folks at Wings and Wizards will not kill me for saying, do not ever use DMX control for interactives. It's a nightmare. Yeah, it's a nightmare. And I'll talk a little bit about why I think that in a bit. So yeah, so Wings and Wizards, Wings and Wizards really neat, and it's all this centralized control system that then speaks out to, that is mostly controlled by the central control system, except for little Arduino packs that are in every single room. So, and those Arduinos are connected to light sensors. And those light sensors will just send out a DMX control telling us whether they've been activated or not. A 0, it'll send 0 if it's not activated, and 255 it is activated. If I could do it again, I came in a little late on this project. If I could go back in time, I would tell them to just send a UDP trigger when it's activated. Yeah, so that's Wings and Wizards. Oh, and there's just some photos. So yeah, so you see this is the fire that's on the left-hand side there. You see the fire, and there's a little box that's being hidden by the guy on the left. That's what you would point your wand at. In the top right-hand corner, that's a really fun one that the go-to folks. Actually, this is actually the one in the top right-hand corner is a really good example of storytelling, of the storytelling angle of this. And what that is though it was originally an interactive, you're casting the spell, it's telling you the shape to do with the spell. And just wasn't working. We were just having troubles with it. And also it would tend to run long. Some of the interactives, the issue that we came across was that they would run short. And that's a thing to look at. They were running short, and so what we had to do is we had to stuff up the story a little bit. We had to do some rewrites and fill story time. On this one, this would run long, meaning that it would just die in the middle of, it would just end in the middle of you doing the interactive, and it would say, move along to the next room. And you'd be like, but I haven't cast my spell yet. And also there was just a litany of things that were causing troubles here. So what we ended up doing is, if you go and do this one, it's actually on a track. And we think that we've done it cleverly enough that it doesn't really register that it's on a track, because you still get to cast your spell, and it's done quickly enough because of the way it's constructed that it feels like the right amount of time to have done a spell. But if you just stood there and did nothing, it would keep moving you forward in the sequence. And then here's a happy little tree guy in the bottom right. Yeah. So the next one is a completely different thing, is a completely different animal. And this is a thing that actually is not, that nobody can go see right now, because it's at the Vancouver airport. And it is this new digital experience that is going to be in the new international Pier D area at Vancouver Airport. And so this was going to open in the summer of 2020, but has not, for obvious reasons. But what's really neat about this is this is a completely passive experience, but has that same level of timeline, and actually even at a deeper level. And if I may, let's see, I'd actually just like to show you this one live. So this is my team viewer access to this experience at Vancouver Airport, and this is a piece that was commissioned by EOS Light Media, and who else do I need to call out on this? This was Keyspace, actually. Juan Darren worked on this, and then in partnership with the architects at Vancouver Airport. And so what we've got going on here is a couple interesting things. And actually, I have to say, Johnny Ostrom, who is here, who I know comes to this quite often, he worked on the amazing visuals in this main lobby space here. I just want to make sure, are you seeing my main screen, or are you seeing my presentation still?
Presentation still.
Stand by.
If you're showing video stuff too, there's a checkbox for video, just to make sure that it works well.
Great. There it is. And optimize for video. There we go. Okay. There we go. So now you should be seeing a little operational control system here. And me clicking around. Is that true? Over on the right-hand side, there's like a green timeline happening.
Yep.
Perfect. Yep. So this is fun. This has got three different video playback systems in three different spaces. One of them only runs at night in an atrium, it's controlling lighting, sound, and video across the whole space. And there's both discrete sound, so sound that is specified to certain speakers depending on what piece of video is playing, and then sound that is ambient depending on which of the 26 states that we're in, the 26 scenes that we're in. And it's actually, and it's all based on time of day. So it intelligently knows the time of day and the weather based on some information that it's pulling down from the weather network. So, but what I'm really like about this is it's actually quite simple because it is just a series of timelines. And so if we look at what we're looking at right now, so we're in the daytime shows still because the sun has not yet set. We know that we're playing timeline 2 here. And so each time, there we go. So in QLab, so this is just QLab, pure QLab. It's going to run through, each of our scenes lives for about 3 minutes and then continues to the next scene. And it calls each of these pieces of information. These are all just UDP packets being sent over the network. I have this touch designer patch right here. This is mostly for knowing what's going on in other places and knowing that they're still alive. So I have a heads up of what's playing on our ultra short throw projectors, which are these really neat Fresnel-based glass screens. They're really cool. So I know what's playing on each of 3 of those, which is one video system. And then there's a transparent LED walkway for the people who are arriving that will have, depending on the scene and the time of day, we'll have different animals walking across the walkway with you. And actually what's neat about the walkway is that it will be different depending on the average speed of the person walking across the walkway. And this is our time of day information. I can override all that if we need to do testing. So that, just for giggles, is our YVR control system, which was a lot of fun to make. And you see what I'll do for myself is each of these. So what's neat about QLab, if you're not familiar with it, is you can hit play. So you can do play cues. Oh, we just changed the scene. There it goes. Oh, and we're on to the next one. So if we want to, for example, play this, but we don't want it to wait, I'm able to reference all of these different triggers and organize them. So these are all of our walkway triggers right here. So I'm able to organize them. And this one is just a UDP message, sending that string to the playback system on the other computer, which is Touch Designer. So there you go. So it's all about, so to me, it's all about making sure you can do custom playback systems, just making sure that they're able to listen to standard control systems. We'll stop that.
Does QLab support other protocols or just UDP?
So QLab will support UDP, OSC, and then is also able to do scripting, specifically AppleScript. So
Sweet.
For all those folks who love their AppleScript.
Yeah, I use a lot of OSC, so that's great.
Yeah, exactly. And actually we can talk a little bit about OSC in a second. Let me do my well-rehearsed return to my screen sharing. There. So that's Vancouver Airport. So this is just really quick, just to give you an idea. I also realize every time I do a presentation like this that I'm terrible at taking like good photos of the work. It's all like, oh, here's something that's broken. Let's take a photo of that. But none of it's like, this is great. This is looking awesome. So over in the top right-hand corner, this is sort of an overview of the whole space. You can see this transparent LED on the right-hand side. That's all of Johnny's work. That's really neat. It's all happening in real time. real-time generated. They always like to say it's like a video game. Yeah, it is. And then in the bottom right-hand corner, that's a little bit of a better view of this Fresnel glass. It doesn't look great in this shot. It doesn't look great in the sun. And there is unfortunately a big window pointed directly at those. But we could do a whole other talk about working with architects on new builds. And then over here on the left-hand side is this neat outdoor. It is outdoors, it is outside, open air. And we've got a full 3 projectors that project onto this at night when it's dark out. And we do this whole, there's a number of shows. There's 4 shows. Well, it's been so long since I've done that. It must be 4 shows, yeah. So there you go. So that is YVR. And let's, whoop, come on, talking tree. There we go. And then the last one. So we're going from super, super big to super, super small intimate experiences here. And that is the talking tree. And this is one, and you'll also notice that I've taken it. The first one was something I was freelancing on. The second one is from EOS. And now this one is from our Sea to Sky immersive group. And this is the talking tree. So this is neat because it is an outdoor experience. It's always on. It's randomly chosen audio. So the idea is that we have a speaker up in this tree, and this is over at Presentation House Theatre in North Vancouver. If you want to go check it out, it's on right now. And you just walk up. So you go find this tree, you walk up to it, and we have a presence sensor there. We're actually using an Axis camera that just sends again well, it's actually a TCP message when it senses that somebody has entered the box. And then it picks one of, right now, 4, but over time we're going to keep expanding the stories, one of 4 stories. And then you get to stand there and listen to a story outside under the shade of a tree. So, and this is something completely different. I threw out the QLab roadmap because it's smaller, couldn't necessarily afford to leave a Mac on the job. So we're using a Raspberry Pi with running an app called Pi Presents, which is a really neat application by a guy out of the UK who's a retired software engineer who has written this. He wrote it for the museum that he's on the board of and has open sourced it. And then I've made like a little user interface so that the folks who work at Presentation House all the time, if they need to change something or they want to particularly like it. So I'll back up. All these stories were written by a program they have called Fireflies, which is elders in the community writing stories. And so thank you, Tim, for posting that up. Who's right? So they've all written stories from their life, and they were given the task of, hey, write something that is relevant to this cedar tree standing here. And so now they're able to come with their families, with their friends, and have these stories played for them. We had it custom scored by my brother over in the bottom right-hand corner, who's that same brother who took me to Disneyland. We are now doing so many projects together. And it's really beautiful. We had our opening yesterday, and it's really comes back for me to this transformative power of immersive themed experiences that happen in the real world. It was really beautiful. Up in the top right-hand corner, that's what the layout looks like. That is mounted to a wall just inside the theater here. So it's based. So if you look at the left-hand picture, this speaker is just above a branch, just outside of the shot. And then we are the initial intention, and if we achieve our dream of having one of these in every park in Vancouver, it will become solar powered. But for the purposes of this one, we've got a single speaker wire running over into the building where our central control system is mounted. And I've got a little touch screen there, and we've got the 2 different apps, the Node-RED and the Pi Presents, on separate Raspberry Pis, and then we have a little amplifier in the left-hand corner. And then thinking about OSC, Tim, Pi Presents has OSC built right in. So all of its communication is done with OSC. And what's interesting about, so then we talk about the bridging of the TCP standard that the Axis camera requires over to that OSC. And that's where a thing like Node-RED comes in really handy, in the same way that I kind of use Touch Designer on all those other projects. Node-RED ends up becoming this bridge. So they stay really light. That's always my goal, is keep those custom coded things really light, but just make them these, I call them translator apps at the end of the day. So yeah, so that's the Talking Tree project. I'm really, really quite proud of it. And yeah, you can come see. So at the end of the day, all three of those, Wings and Wizards, you can check out at BC Place. YVR, you can see the next time that you go to the airport, hopefully soon. And the Talking Tree, you can check out over at Presentation House. So just to recap, UDPs always send great stuff to use. UDP string messages. Get them into UDP however you can. OSC if you have to. And I say that because OSC has the weird little stuff at the end. With all its, like if you send it into an actual packet, like a packet receiver, and you look at what it looks like, it's got a bunch of commas and slashes and things that you need to do. If you're talking OSC to OSC, that's great. But if you need to translate it, it becomes a little icky. But for me, it's all about finding anything that has a clear call and response. So that's why I didn't like DMX on Wings and Wizards, is because DMX is just a flow over the system. And there is no, besides watching it on like a lighting console's readout, or on like the way Touch Designer deals with it makes my head hurt. There's no, to me, that's not a clear call and response. It is like, if I send you this trigger, do you give me a readout that said, yep, I got that trigger? That's what I need in my life. Pre-existing systems, use them as much as you can. QLab, obviously, I've talked a lot about. QSys is an audio system that also has scripting built in. Really great ways of doing this kind of talking back and forth. It's a little bit spendy, so it's probably not for all installations. Pharos and QServer are great lighting controllers. Touch Designer as a translator, keep it small, and then always build a UI. So going back to our friend at the very beginning that I talked about, who's at the mining museum in Glace Bay, Nova Scotia, and it's just her, but she's got this insane 3-projector, 24-speaker layout that needs to run perfectly for every guest. Definitely, she needs to have a user interface, and she needs to have these buttons that can show her clear call and response testability. Because if I'm calling her, I can't be there. I need to be able to say, when you press this button, what does it say? And then I always just bring it back to storytelling as well. One of the tricky things that ended up happening at Wings and Wizards is we ended up having those things go too long and too short because there wasn't a lot of time for storyboarding and play testing. So always make that time. So that really, and so these are some things that are upcoming for me. We're going to be doing some work in Burnaby for Halloween. I've really started doing things with churches, helping them tell their stories in different ways. And we're going to be doing a little train experience out in Maple Ridge later this summer. So that's what I got for you. It's talk time. I am happy to talk. Thank you so much for listening.
Thanks so much, Joel. That was really impressive. Thanks for sharing that with us.
Yeah, thank you.
Yeah, and thanks everyone, some of the late joiners, but nonetheless, thank you for joining us on this hot day. Brady, I see you, and Omar, stay cool, I know. Mm-hmm. That's awesome, Joel. I mean, thanks for telling us about that. I wanted to just start out by throwing a question away, specifically about some of the themes we talked about. What are the most important factors that you consider when you're thinking about building something that's durable and repeatable?
the most important factors I'd consider are who's the end user, who's going to be having to maintain it, and what's their knowledge base, because then we can, and what's our ability to get back to it, and how much time do we actually want to spend getting back to it, and then from there we can build out the whole system. I said it in there. I think I will always go for an out-of-the-box solution that has a manual before I start, and I will sooner take out features of the experience or figure out ways that we can fake up features than give something that's going to be hard to maintain. And that's actually something interesting to me about the storytelling side of it as well. Is asking the question of, okay, we've got this great idea where we want to do X, Y, and Z. And I encounter this actually a lot. EOS is a very technology-driven company, and I mean, I think all of us have had this same feeling, where it's like we get really excited about cool tech, right? And the question that I also will always ask is like, so if I don't know that that's how we're doing it, does it matter? And what I mean by that is there another way to get at that, or will anybody even care that it's that level of responsiveness or interactivity? Is it enough to, in the 3-minute sequence that we have in Wings and Wizards, let people move their wand for 10 seconds and then move them to the next thing to try to move their wand? Does it matter that, like, if you got it in 5, that you have to wait around at the end of the 5? Sometimes the answer is yes. Sometimes the answer is no. But that also, to me, factors into keeping things stable and consistent.
Yeah, that's a really good answer, because I know one of the statistics they always use in theme park design is throughput. And that's sort of like you've got a huge calculation. It's financial, but it's also kind of business. Like it's the experience of how many people get to go through it at any one time. So
at the same time, so it's interesting if you think of something like the Spider-Man ride that just opened at Avengers Campus, or any that's like predecessors like Toy Story, where it's got all kinds of interactivity. So if you don't know Spider-Man, you can like move your hands like that, and you're slinging webs, and that's pretty cool. And you're on a track, and so this idea of throughput, of being able to get people through, of just being able to put through as many people as you can. And we had the same thing on Wings and Wizards. Is it like, at the end of the day, it is a commercial venture. So getting people through is so important, as well as giving them the feeling of having a immersive, interactive, life-changing experience.
Yeah, but what's interesting is systems versus people. That's another thing I find fascinating. I mean, I went to, I don't know if you guys know the, I'm forgetting now, but the Beaumont Studios down by, I think, 5th, and it's kind of in the main area, not too far from Tim. And they had a Halloween experience. I think Go-To Productions did some stuff with them. And before COVID, it was very much a people-driven experience. And the throughput was dictated by how long, it was very organic, how long a group of people would be in a room with a bunch of actors. When the actors would play out the drama, interact with the people, usher them to the next room. And they did something rather clever. They would have a moment when the actor would scream, and you realize that it was timed the same part of the experience, every single room that the audience would go in, to let the next person or the following group know when it was time to move the people on. So there was kind of a manual approach to throughput. But I wonder, like, in show control systems, do you have that same kind of automated sense of like when it's time to move people through? How do you manage that level of mobility?
Yeah, there's 2 ways that you can go about it. The first one is instructional. Like, it is very much, we are on a track, and every 3 minutes this thing is going to happen. and that's a great way to do it. And then obviously you build into your queuing that you go, hey, like time to move on. You give some kind of information. The second one, which I think is a really interesting way of doing things, is sort of a more technological version of what you're talking about. So if somebody triggers something in one room, if they've activated the thing, then that can trigger everything else, right? Because once you have the ability, in the same way that the actor can scream and everybody else knows it's time we can keep moving on, we can do the same thing in terms of our technology and our systems, where that trigger can actually be a trigger for 10 other things. Now, of course, at the end of the day, in terms of content, you need to start thinking about, well, do I have musical vamps? Do I have, like, how do we vamp that in terms of content? But it's the exactly same as the performers.
Yeah, interesting.
Yeah.
On the theme of reliability in these kind of long-running installations, I wondered if you could speak at all to reliability and redundancy of the hardware you're using. Like you were saying, you deploy a lot of this stuff on Macs or Raspberry Pis. Have you had a case where those like fail in the field, or?
Yeah, absolutely. Not as much though. So like, so EOS has a huge backlog of stuff out in the field. I think the oldest Mac Mini that is out in the field right now is 10 years old, which in general will outlast a kind of the small to medium level attractions and experiences we see around here, especially in like retail or even architectural stuff. But so Raspberry Pis, I probably wouldn't tend to put on anything that I'm not close to. Though what's really nice about a Raspberry Pi is you just get the little SD card and flip it into the new one and you're off to the races. Macs are are very reliable and have been for years. What is the nice part of a Mac is, as I was helping this person through some issues the other day, she realized that it was a Mac. Like we don't try to hide that it's on a Mac or anything. She just it just didn't grok for her. She went, oh, this is a Mac. Yeah, I know how to reboot this computer. Great, I can do that. And so that's great. In terms of the larger scale stuff, like if I could go back and do YVR again, I would put it on a proper media server. But I think our big win on that is having the QLab on the Mac. I think that's going to last forever. And having that QSys system, which is designed for long-term 24/7 playback. Yeah, did that even answer your question?
Yeah, that's a good start. I mean, you wait till it fails and see what happens, right?
You wait till it fails, see what happens. Keep your backups, like backup, and like at the end of the day, it's all, people kind of get that it's all technology, and they get that it fails, but where they are grateful is that they don't have to, when you're giving it over to an operator, is that they don't have to either feel like they're beholden to you to fix it like they're not worried that it's going to break because they know that they'll need to call you and they're going to be out for a day or two or three or a week or a month. But also they know that they have a couple really easy steps in their back pocket, and it's something that they feel like is approachable to them if they ever do need to get it. And then at the end of the day, when it does break and it's a hardware problem, and everybody can go, oh, well, that was a hardware problem, and that thing lasted 10 years. Awesome. Everybody feels good at that point.
I'm going to bring up my buddy Omar here because he's on the call. One of our grad school projects was to work on this interactive weaving loom for the Museum of Anthropology. And one of the challenges we ran across was, I think, Omar, correct me if I'm wrong, was it it was a Mac Mini as well, wasn't it? That was about, gosh, maybe seven years ago.
Oh. Hello.
Hey, Omar,
Hello.
are you?
Hey, what's up? No. It was a Raspberry Pi and what else? A bare conductive component, I think. The one that you use conductive paint, and then you touch it, and then that was connected to a Raspberry Pi, and it was acting as a keyboard. But that was it.
Yeah,
I mean, in terms of hardware, that was it.
That was like minimum viable product, but it lasted for a long time. The hardware kept breaking, but not hardware, but the physical parts of the installation were the finickiest, the parts that people touch. But one of the challenges we found was like, we wanted to create a way of like having an off switch so that people who use the room when it wasn't open to the public could just turn off the audio portion. But we didn't want to have an off switch that the public could see because then they could turn it off. And so like one of the challenges of an installation, how do you make it so that it's easy for the operator to adjust it, but there's still like a secret panel somewhere that most people can't find? Have you ever run across those experiences?
Oh yeah, I mean, so it's exactly what you're saying. It's the secret panel at the end of the day, or so on the Talking Tree project, we've got it in the other room and it's accessible, and it's the same idea. Hey, we're actually going to have like a little gathering on the lawn. We don't want this thing to talk at us for the next 4 hours. Switch off the switch. But where I found the best kind of off switches are to put everything on a network, especially in these more like in places where it's actually buildings, get it on a network and have a secondary Raspberry Pi running Node-RED that is your off switch. And that's where you can start using your UDP triggers again to kill some audio, or say, hey, like the audio is now off on this experience.
Yeah.
And then you've just got and then you've got like just a little web GUI that you can say, hey, like on any of your computers, as long as you're on this network, go to this URL and head off. Or here's like a little iPad.
I think that would have been way better. I think instead what happened is the museum staff would go in and just unplug the whole thing. And then they would say it's not turning on, so we have to go and like restart.
Well, and then you're doing a hard power off of a Raspberry Pi. So it's like, is the SD card gonna get fried this time?
Exactly. Actually, maybe we haven't gone back in a while, so maybe it's fried. That's a good point. Does anyone? I know folks on the call. One of our Creative Tech members, Brady. I know you've done a lot of installation stuff around immersive sound experiences. Do you have any interesting experiences you want to share around the issues we're talking about, which is repeatability, durability, throughput, stuff like that? Oh, Brady, I think you're on mute. There you are.
Test.
Yep. All good.
There you are.
Yeah, because I have sound, I have to have lots of microphones on, one that's the right. No, when I was just listening there, I was wondering if this Node-RED does do sound. Does it kind of transmit sound?
It has. That's an interesting question. It has some audio nodes to it.
Okay.
It's definitely
because I've never heard of that before, and it sounds cool.
Yeah, it's definitely more of like an Internet of Things connection app. Sure, we'll call it an app. But I believe when I was playing around, I saw a little audio output piece. What I would say, if you're looking, Pi Presents is actually the one that whenever I'm doing a sound-based installation, so like the Talking Tree, the sound is actually coming out of Pi Presents. And Node-RED is my controller. Yeah.
Excuse me
Yeah.
while I make crinkling sounds.
No problem.
Part of the audio experience.
Is that
Well,
EY
exactly. We get
or is
that's
that PI?
PI presents. PI, and actually Pi presents. So the project I didn't talk about was so last winter I did a Christmas Carol show, an immersive Christmas Carol at the Roadie House Museum, and we had people walk through the Roadie House, and that was like a low budget project, but we just wanted to test this idea of walk-through experiences using storytelling in museums, and that was all Raspberry Pis running Pi Presents, and then a central controller running QLab, triggering the sequences. And what's neat on the Pi Presents app, because it's got OSC, is that it can report back when it's completed a track, and then your control system can go, great, that track's done, next scene. And that way, if because we were editing audio and things were getting longer and shorter, so we didn't actually have to change our timeline in the central control, because it was just dictated by when a room would end, which was a whole interesting thing, because when you're in a space like that and you have multiple rooms and you have people moving through, and there's parts of the audio that are louder than others, and the space isn't soundproof properly. The point being, at one point, we had a bell ring in one room during like a quiet, thoughtful moment in another room, and we went, we need to cut a minute out of this piece of audio so that doesn't happen. But because of that so because of that crosstalk, because of that communication that's already built in, it actually was a super easy thing to do.
Actually, that's a really good point, Joel. Disneyland, for example, they really put a lot of effort into the crafting of spaces and audio spaces too, because of that cross sound issue. You had mentioned earlier in your talk the challenges of working with architects.
Yes.
Now, there's a difference between theme park designers and traditional architects. Talk us through some of the challenges you have with that type of, or a person that comes from that kind of background who's maybe unfamiliar with installation.
Well, that's what the core of it is, right? Is that architects have gone through architecture school and they want to make beautiful buildings. And I've definitely come in contact with a lot of architects who are very aware of what's possible in the digital media space. But I mean, one of the difficulties with YVR, and actually one of the difficulties with a project that I'm working on right now, is that they don't know what's possible. So they go one of two ways. They either go, well, then nothing's possible, and I don't really want digital media on here, and I don't want interactivity because it's bad or whatever. Or they go the other way, where it is they kind of over-engineer this idea, and like, so this guy, he had this outdoor thing, and he's like, oh, we'll have 4 screens across the back, and then there will be a hole in the floor, and we'll have a video screen in the hole in the floor, and it'll be like you're flying. And then we just had to kind of end up doing a lot of mock-ups to prove out that did not work the way he had imagined it in his mind, which was great, but also he was pretty stuck on it, so we had to do a lot of mock-ups. So what it ends up being is a little bit of a dance of education, of going, this is what's out there in the world, this is what's possible, but also it comes back to story. It comes back to, what is the story that you actually want to tell, and how can we best make this happen together?
Yeah, no, that's a good point.
Yeah, for me, it's all about there's a guy named Joe Rohde. I can't believe I've gotten this far into the talk and not referenced Joe Rohde. He's a theme park designer, brilliant guy. And, but he'll always talk about the importance of starting with the authenticity of the story, And once you got that nailed down, like once you go, this is what we're trying to communicate, then everything, and then it turns into a series of, well, what if we could do this? What if we could do this? What if we could do this to communicate it? And then you go, okay, there's what it is. And it could be a building, it could be a show, it could be whatever.
For those that are unfamiliar, so Joe Rohde is one of the most famous and articulate theme park designers. He worked at Disney for a large portion of his career, and he was responsible for Animal Kingdom, what was it called, that Mount Everest roller coaster ride?
Yeah, Expedition Everest.
World, Expedition Everest, and then also the more recent Guardians of the Galaxy kind of drop tower. That used to be the old Hollywood tower in Disneyland. And what's so interesting is, like you said, Joel, like he starts from the theme as the very top level, the meta level above everything else. And then below that, then you get into the details of what the experience is like. But even starting at the very high level, like man versus nature, or these sort of archetypal concepts. And then from that, you get deeper into the experience.
So what's crazy about Joe Rohde actually is he left Imagineering to go and be the experience designer for Virgin Galactic. And if you can find his like little, he did a video when he joined Virgin Galactic about the importance of looking down at the Earth and realizing that this is all ours and we can do, and it's up to us to look after it. And yeah, he's amazing.
Yeah, he goes on these incredible expeditions too. I mean, he lives the journey. He goes to Bhutan, he goes to Tibet, he lives with the indigenous people. I mean, he really is quite an interesting guy. But talking about today, I mean, I think what you're touching on too is you're mentioning doing all these mock-ups for someone to prove out an idea, or to prove out maybe why the idea isn't such a good idea, right? And a lot of that stems from maybe not always having a clear theme to start from, or the other person not sharing that same common understanding of what you're trying to produce, right?
Mm-hmm.
So I think that's a really, really important idea. What kind of mock-ups, what kind of prototyping, testing, iterating do you do? And how long does that take before you start getting to serious build?
Oh, that depends on the project. But generally, if I've got a concept, I will try to at least walk in the shoes of a guest once or twice before we pull the trigger on it. So what that might mean is, in the case of the Talking Tree project, is we grab a speaker, we grab a computer, and then put the speaker up in the air, walk underneath it, and having some audio start playing and go like, is this interesting? Is there something interesting about this? In the case of YVR, we had so tree stories, we did that a few months ago. That was a really fast moving project anyways. But yeah, we did it really quick and dirty. YVR, which is obviously on a completely different scale. Like we had the glass in the office for a year, and with the folks doing content coming through every few weeks, taking a look at content. Does this content look good? Does it work? Looking at that the transparent LED that we were looking at that Johnny did the work on. He tried so many different ways of like, what looks neat if it's transparent, what looks good if, does it look good if it's just like a single animal going through, does it look good if it's a full color piece here? So that's, yeah, so something on that level is year of work and revisions. So yeah, so it comes down to size and a little bit like you're saying, it like if I'm the only creative director on a project and presentation house has gone, yeah, we trust you to make something, well, we're probably not going to do a whole lot of mock-ups. We're probably just going to do we're just going to do one check for my own well-being and then make it.
Absolutely. Brady, would you mind, explaining your question? Sounds interesting.
Sure. So one of the problems I think we all have is that we create this system that has like heterogeneous elements, and they're all different nodes. So the one might be like, I don't know, like a touch OSC controller, and then a Raspberry Pi that's reading a temperature, and or Arduino. And like, I know that Arduino now has this Internet of Things cloud-based service where you can pay, I think it's $6 a month, and then you can register all your cloud devices, and then you get URLs and you can query them, as you were talking about, like this call and response, which usually ends up being an HTTP request. And of course, the internet way of doing this is DNS, right? We don't want to type the IP numbers and they change, so we get DNS. But you can't spin up DNS for every little node that you have in an installation, but you often have a need for that, where different nodes are using DHCP, have different IP addresses. So is there something that you use just for the systems to find their parts, and that is name-based, so that it has a human mnemonic, and then it can sort of, if things reboot, they can find each other themselves or parts of the whole system?
Mm-hmm. I have a hunch my answer is going to be not very satisfying, because everything I do is local network. So I really truly just static IP everything. Like take DHCP out of it. Yeah, it's reliable. I know exactly who you are. I've started putting in a little bit of. I've started using like localhost names on some smaller things. But at the end of the day, yeah, like I'll write up an IP schedule, identify everything in that schedule. So if it's a bigger thing, I can look back on it, or somebody else can look back on it. And that's just how I do it. Just everything's static. Yeah.
You could do that at the router level too. Just have everything like a named static, so it can't ever change.
Mm-hmm.
I know Rendezvous was meant to do this for us, and the IoT protocols also do it. But like I said, I don't want to pay $6 a month for some project that is only one node, and it's going to a client and it's going to sit in a back storage room for like 8 months, and then then it's going to exist for a run and then go back into storage. It just doesn't fit with the model that we use. Yeah.
Well, and I was working on a project recently, and I've kind of I come from my static IP everything world, and the guy I was working with on it, he did what you're saying, Tim. He set all of his IPs in his router based on MAC addresses, but then the router went down one day, and so the whole system went down, which seemed not ideal to me. Which like, because in static IPing everything, that also actually goes back to stability. It's like nothing is relying on anything to get its IP address. It knows its IP address. I have it hard coded into QLab that this is the IP address that you're calling. Our back and forths are just all hard coded in. So in terms of stability, that all feels really good to me. I'm sure that there will become a point in my life where that's not going to scale. I hope that moment comes where that's not going to scale. And I hope also when that moment comes, there's an awesome IT department that makes it so I don't have to think about it.
One of the things I do is just to halve the kind of number of IP addresses is I always have if I'm using OSC, I get the sort of leaf nodes to reply to a query. So they always, because UDP, when you ask for UDP, you get, obviously you know who asked you, so you get the IP of the caller. And UDP actually is two-way, because you kind of have a reply port. It's kind of weird, but a lot of OSC messages don't allow you to reply to a caller, but UDP that underneath does allow that. Anyway.
So you've just made me realize something about what I do, which is what I will tend to do is that I always have that central system piece, so that basically the QLab computer, and everything will talk. Like even if this guy over here is triggering something at this node over here, I have everybody talk centrally, and central controls everything. So nobody actually has to crosstalk to another one. I always go central, and I find that to be easier to manage and easier to troubleshoot. So yeah, you just made me realize that is another part of how I do things. Yeah. Which is
assuming it doesn't break.
Yeah, exactly. Assuming that central doesn't break. Which I realize. Which I also realize that most of the work that I'm doing is very is fairly show based, is pretty linear with a little bit of interactivity in it. So it's certainly got its holes, but it works for me.
Joel, have you done any interactivity where people use their mobile phones? Like any sort of installations where they can affect things with their phone, or by joining a network and can?
I haven't had the opportunity to do it yet. I've pitched a bunch of those and just haven't gotten a chance to do one yet. I mean, I've definitely done, like, I'll do things on my phone where I build a little local host UI that I can do stuff on my phone and it will affect. But I've never gotten the chance to actually execute one that goes out to the general public.
Because that's always been kind of an ambition I've always talked about, was having like an open canvas and people could contribute to it from their phone. I wonder technically what would be the biggest hurdle to overcome for something like that.
Getting something onto people's phones would be the biggest hurdle.
Well, so if it's not an app, would it be a web address? Take it away.
So
Joel.
I know. So one of the ones that I've pitched, it was a connect to the network. It's a web address. We even like tested out it conceptually, and it's connect to the thing, connect to the network, go to this address, and then the trickiest thing. It specifically was about controlling lighting on a building. And so the trickiest thing was was actually in the lighting controllers, and how do you tell the lighting controllers what means what, and how do you sequence out who got in first, because the idea would be that as you get in, you get a couple seconds to play with the thing. So how do you sequence who got in first, who takes precedence on the control, that kind of thing. Or do you let it be cacophony, which is fine too.
And I was gonna, and further to the point, how do you design an experience for one person versus like simultaneously? Like, what happens if 10,000 people join? Like you said, how do you prioritize that experience?
And if you design it for one person, and like you go, oh well, it's one person at a time. How do you communicate to the other people? Oh well, this is just for one person at a time. So
it's never just one person.
It's never just one person. Like, you can't do it.
If it's internet connected, you can always leverage something like Twitter as an input, and then just have your own backend that's queuing and processing.
Yeah.
Rather than a dedicated web page or server.
So it's really interesting to hear also about using these scripts like weather and time of day, and specifically for me about sound, because I develop an app that also reads weather and location data and converts this to OVC or MIDI, and we have actually one kind of collaborative script that we made where several users can, if they have the app, they can it sends the average. You get the average rotation. This can be, for example, rotation towards the sun or something. And, so if everyone's turning in the same direction, the signal will be full. So you can do this kind of. And we managed to do this using WebSocket
yeah, that's really cool.
So yeah.
That's really cool. I think. Do you guys know the company Moment Factory? Does that name ring a bell? Yeah, they.
Yeah.
I think they did an experience like that for the LAX airport. They had, I think, either an arrivals or departures lounge, and they would read in the time of day and the weather, and then they would produce interactive content. And what I love about certain interactives is it would be on multiple screens, and it would kind of like follow you in a way. So as you're walking the lounge, there'd be like a tower that would have an LED screen. There'd be like a square screen, and there'd be something closer to the lobby. And you can kind of see these pre-filmed experiences triggered by motion as people would walk by. And it would kind of like, they'd have one, it was dancers with a trail effect. And the dancers would kind of dance along that lounge area.
Yeah.
And to me, that's the opposite of like a bad experience with an architect. That's like an experience where the architect and the designer are actually both trying to do the same thing. They're moving people through a space, but they're doing it in like an artful kind of way.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, but the live interactive signage, bringing in real weather data, Mimi actually on our call, I think she did an interactive experience based on, I think it was tide data or water flow data. Mimi, do you remember that project that you worked on?
Oh yeah,
I thought that was so cool.
Watershed, like water level, I believe, and flow rate.
Awesome.
Yeah, and that was open data, right? That you just got from the government website.
Yep, except it was in a, I think, PNG file format or something. Like you had to like, yeah, it was awful. Like
What?
it was really hard to like. It was like it was uploaded as Excel and then rendered as a PNG file or something. So like, I had to like scrape it elsewhere. Like I remember talking about this. I wish I would keep better notes on my project, but I do remember it was like the actual data available on the website is a PNG file. I had to like go somewhere to scrape it.
Insane.
Oh my God. But the idea was still pretty cool,
Yes.
which was
Yeah,
showing compressed. Yeah, showing real weather patterns or water flow patterns over, I think it was a year that you took data from.
Yep, a year on 3 different watersheds.
Yeah.
Yeah,
I mean, I think.
go
ahead.
Go
Joel.
ahead. Sorry. No, you were going to ask.
Nope.
I was going to take it in a slightly other direction, but
you know what? Go for it.
Great. So similarly, pulling down information. What's interesting to me is one of our big dreams on the Lights of Hope piece that we didn't really do, that we kind of bunted on, was the idea of people being able to submit through Twitter or texting or whatever a message or donating, and then being instantly recognized on the visuals. And we kind of bunted on it because the worry was about the content, was about not being able to parse the content in real time to avoid like people swearing or posting inappropriate pictures up on the wall. And that's the thing that is always as soon as I get outside of thinking about like, oh, we'll reference the weather or we'll reference what time of day it is, like getting to that next level of interactivity for people. Yeah, like how can we do that in a way that is also safe, like that feels real but is safe? You know,
it is so true, right? People are human. People will do and say whatever they want. And it's funny because I've thought about that idea too, of a live donation experience. I mean, I think there's many ways of approaching it, but someone could even create an offensive Twitter handle just so that they could have their Twitter handle show up, right? So even if you only bring in the user data and you don't bring in the tweet itself, it could still circumvent that.
Yeah, and I guess that's another good point, which is for any live data, you need a moderator, and if you have a moderator, it's no longer live, right? So how does one deal with the problem of how live to make it an experience?
Or
Twitch actually has
embrace the
Just
spirit
embrace
of the
the
internet.
chaos.
Just embrace it. Yeah.
I mean, there's pretty mature tools for all of this stuff on Twitch. It's like, I don't think it would be useful for a installation out of the box, but it's possible you could use some of it, because like all of this stuff of like, you know, having live feedback of donations and also filtering in real time and like auto moderating any kind of like text messaging stuff. They have pretty mature tools for that. It'd be interesting to try to like leverage some of that. I'm not sure how you would go about doing that.
Twitch does have APIs, doesn't it? Like you can, you can call on. So maybe, I don't know.
Yeah.
So maybe Joel, you could revisit that for the next.
I will revisit that.
Year.
Yeah.
What were you thinking of, having like a master screen that would just show like the last person that donated, or pull up their tweet or something like that?
Well, so the way it functioned last year was we had is that they were selling micro donations, and the idea behind the digital experience was that you make a micro donation and you buy like one of a small star in the digital, and over the course of the season, your name would just get added to the experience. And we did end up doing that. There would just be about a 1 day lag time where the donations offices would receive the donation, add it to the Google Sheet, and then the Google Sheet was automatically parsed and added it to the display, which worked fine. But yeah, the goal was like, we would have loved, and then in the center there was photos, with the idea that people would take photos, post them on Instagram, and then they would show up there. But then it was kind of the same thing. It would be, you'd submit a photo either through social or just directly to Lights of Hope, and they'd add it to the Google Sheet. It would get added to the experience. But yeah, like in a perfect world, it would be, hey, I texted my donation and now I am on the donation board. And then it would like pop up and be like, hey, thanks Joel for your donation.
Yeah.
Not really a question, but I definitely appreciate seeing Touch Designer on the list for like this level of some of the projects, because I feel like Touch Designer is like, I mean, I love it and I use it for a lot of things, but it definitely has a bit of like an identity crisis in terms of like, it can be used for so many things that people don't know what to use it for, or even like what it is. But like every time that students come to me and they're like, oh, I have this input, and then I'm like going to a projector, and then I need to play a sound, I'm like, just do it in Touch Designer. It's like so much easier to connect a whole bunch of things than any other system is going to do for you.
I think the unsung value of Touch Designer, I'll have to say that on some of the longer term installations, it's let me down on visual outputs, just because of some of the weird kludginess of it. But in terms of being like a thing that can allow for communications to happen, it is rock solid. And then the fact that I can overlay any kind of UI, like I don't know that I'd trust it on a long-term exhibit that I'm not looking over every day to run perfectly, but definitely on communications, I would put it any day of the week.
Yeah, there are some pretty good tools that will like watch your processes and, you know, kind of restart them for long-term stuff. Because yeah, it's, I mean, it has its things. I mean, I've had it running for like a week on an installation and had no problems, but yeah, I'm not sure about long-term, like months or years.
Yeah.
Well, that's an interesting thing. So we're talking about OSC and stuff. What are your thoughts in general about using open source tools in relationship to the durability or consistency of a project? And following up on that, using a private software, and then if that software gets bought or something, and you know, like what happens to the code after that company either gets bought or goes bankrupt or something like that. And I use Blender, which was a closed tool, and then it became open sourced, and then now it's like government funded kind of foundation in Amsterdam for academic research. So yeah, just curious what your thoughts are about open source for installations.
I just like knowing who I can call, who that actually like has access to the back end of the software and knows how it works. So like PyPresents is open source, but also it's got like one main guy that goes, I'm the guy, but also feel free to hack it up. Or then there's QLab that's been out there for I think 20 years or something now at this point. And they've got a great support system. So if I know who I can call, I feel pretty good. If I'm using something new, I'm definitely going to like test it. And like that's one of those times that you really want to run a test. You want to do a mock-up and you want to run it over and over again, like let it actually run for weeks and weeks. If I know who to call, I'm pretty happy.
And conversely, have you had experiences with a sketchy tool that you adopted either at the last minute or something that you felt you wish you had something better, and then kind of it bit you in the ass later, realizing you didn't have what you needed?
What was it? Yes. And then we swiftly replaced it. But also at the same time, actually, like, so if I look at EOS, for example, like EOS also has a bunch of apps that they custom code. And it's like sometimes you put those out too soon and you use a code base that didn't do quite what you wanted. So I can't think of a specific example, mostly because like all of the installs are so long that we kind of squish out those bugs as they come, or if it's like a quick up and quick down, I'm using something that I've used before. Yeah. Or if it was one that let me down, it was a me problem. Yeah.
I think everybody enjoys learning from others' epic fails or near epic fails. Yeah.
I'm sorry. So I've got one right now, actually. I've got one thing going on right now. Where I've got a person who is like on the other side of the country, and we put in we were using an external graphics card so that we could push out 4 screens, and then also like we had to drive a whole bunch of channels of audio. Actually, this is the Cape Breton person. And what's happening with them right now is that on restarts, so we do a nightly restart, and what is happening is that because they're both USB based devices, for some reason, sometimes they both don't connect to the computer, and consistently, and what's crazy about it is the consistent behavior is that we boot it up and QLab's great because it'll report that you don't have any, that it's like, oh, the projectors that I'm expecting to see aren't here. And you go, oh, and then it turns out, yeah, they haven't connected to the system. So we reboot. And then the audio interface, the Motu, doesn't connect. And then we reboot again, and then everything's connected fine. Which is totally weird. And then I made that exactly same face that Darren made. But yeah, it's totally weird. And that was like a thing that we did not see until we had left. And so now we have to either put in their manual that if it's not connected, try rebooting twice, or what we're actually going to do is we're going to move it to audio over IP so that we don't have this weird USB interference. But that's scary.
Gremlins. It's gremlins. At a certain point, you just have to Sam's nodding his head because Sam knows.
Yeah.
Sam knows
I have
the
a war
experience of it.
story if it's got to that point in the meeting.
Go for it, Brady. We want to hear this. What happened?
So USB, if you have identical devices, it's impossible to tell which ones they are, right?
Yeah.
So sometimes I will buy like 2 different webcams. I like them, but I won't buy the same one because I want to know which one's which. You know, like if you have 2, I don't know, USB somethings that convert something, they're great, but then you just don't know what they are because their name's always the same. But the war story is that I did a 3-continent, 200-player, same screen multiplayer game, same place, and everyone had the same USB controller. And you can see where this goes. So we would have this system where people would have to basically press every button in the theater from front left to back right in order for it to know who was who. And if one controller got disconnected, we'd have to do that all over again. And it happened multiple times in the middle of the theatrical performance. So it was, and that's just because of the USB protocol. There's no unique ID, and basically it's the order in which the hubs report everything, that everything gets sorted. That the IDs are assigned as they connect, and they might reconnect in a different order. It's completely random. You will not know. So there's the nightmare.
That's insane.
Don't use USB.
Yeah.
If you can, help it.
Yeah.
For things that are the same.
Yeah.
What's your experience like, Joel, working with tech writers? How much detail do you put into your technical writers?
Depends on the project.
Yeah.
Are you thinking about are you thinking about when we get into a project, or are you thinking about like on a manual on the way out? Because a lot of the time, because 90% of the time, I'm the one speccing the tech, and it's more of and I just go, this is what you need, and then it's a money thing. Or are you thinking about detail on the way out?
I guess maybe more on the way out. Like I'm thinking of the Van Gogh installation, like a traveling installation where you aren't always the same crew that sets it up.
Yeah.
And like some of your learnings about the experience, especially with the show control system that travels.
Yeah. So on the Christmas Carol, actually, we're shopping it around right now to travel to a bunch of museums for this Christmas season, and we've definitely been going back and forth on that. So the way we've been doing it is our rider is exactly what we had is if you want the show, it needs to be this tech, and you can either buy it from us, or we can ship, or we can rent you the rig. And that'll be and that's been tricky. So on a couple, we've gone, here's our specs, here's our suggested specs, and then come back to us with proposals. And that's been working out okay, but I'm definitely very particular about it. Because if you want to send something and have people just set it up and have it work, I need to be able to, and you want to be able to call me and get an answer, I need to know exactly what you're working with.
Yeah. It's interesting because Team Lab, the company based out of Japan, they had an installation at MOA a couple of years ago, and I thought it was cool, but I was really surprised how laggy some of the graphics were. I knew that it was running out of a game engine. It was basically where it would show like a kanji or a Japanese character, and you would kind of move your hand and it would appear as the shape of the kanji that it represented. And it was this beautiful water and ink kind of aesthetic. But I noticed that when too many sprites would appear on the screen, or it would actually pull in some 3D geometry from the game engine, that it became really laggy. And like it was down to like 5 frames a second kind of laggy. And it's always interesting when you think about, well, there's the original installation, that was intended? And then was there any substitution of graphics cards or hardware or something about the way it was set up that reduced that
They
playback?
specified that exactly. Like they specified that machine. I think.
Yeah.
That machine over.
And Sam, I know that you guys worked on it, so I know you did a really good job setting it up. It makes me wonder why Team Lab would have specified that, right? Like
I don't know what happened.
It's weird, right? Yeah, you guys did an awesome job.
They specified that machine, and that's the one we put in.
And well, therefore, it's in the tech writer. It's in the original document.
Pretty much was the best GPU you could buy at the time.
Yeah.
Well, and what's
so maybe
interesting,
it was just really it. Oh, go ahead, Joel.
Yeah. Well, so what's interesting to me about this, and it's the difference to me between themed entertainment and attractions and touring shows, is that where the space I tend to play in is this idea that we have a month of install and it gets slammed. Whereas Sam, how long did you have to set up that?
I wasn't really on that install, so yeah.
But I imagine it was a week. It was like a week up.
A couple weeks, yeah.
Yeah. So it becomes, because then my other question would be okay, so what are in terms of the actual tech? I know that at any given time if I'm doing a run up to an opening, I'm gonna run a show or an experience dozens of times a day, and in every single one I'll find another bug. And it's all about optimizing the machine, making sure that things are shut off, doing those kind of tests. And then when you're in permanent installation, then it's that's great, and you know that it's going to run. Whereas back in my theater days, you go into the theater, you set up, you've got to do the show at 8 o'clock. You got there at 10 a.m. It's maybe it'll work. I know it's the right gear, but who knows what we forgot to do or didn't do or missed in the rider. That's a tricky one, right?
But I'm sure they probably did everything that the spec asked for. And I was just thinking it could have just been a really ambitious project, because if they had a graphics card now, like a GTX or a 3090 or something, I'm sure it would be a lot different, right? But it was still a very cool experience.
Yeah,
I think it's always tricky when you're dealing with real time.
More storage limited. I think it might be just trying to pull a lot of video streams off. It might not have been a GPU thing as much as a storage thing.
Could have been, yeah. Switching gears a little bit, Joel, curious, what is your moonshot? What is your epic, 7-9-star experience that you one day would be grateful enough to pull off if you had unlimited resources, unlimited budget? What's your moonshot project? I'm sure you have one somewhere.
Look, I would love the moonshot. Is to have a fully realized theme park. That's the moonshot, is to build a theme park that has a unified story, where at any given time, that if something happens in one area that triggers things in another area, and there's a unified story to the entire park. That's the moonshot. Yeah.
And what, do you have an idea about a theme that you would go with, or
no?
Something
I don't.
that would tie it all together. No.
What would so I have. So I've got the smaller version of that right now. Is this idea of it is an idea of a spaceship experience. So this idea that there's a spaceship that's come crash to Earth, and that it is a and it's been turned into a money making exhibit for you to come and just see this unknown thing that has crashed to Earth. And so you and your friends and family or whatever go into this spaceship, and it feels kind of like an artifact, but then all of a sudden it lights up and you get blasted into space. So now all of a sudden you're up in space, and you are controlling the ship and you can reveal the mystery of what's happened in the ship and while you're flying through space, and then you can either pilot yourself back to Earth, or you can pilot yourself to somewhere else in the galaxy, and that's like an experience that actually I think I can reasonably pull off in the next year. But it would be something along those lines. I think I am so, just as a creator, I tend to get inspired by what's needed by the project in the moment. So like the tree story project came out of that these people had no way of sharing their stories because they normally do it in the theater, and that we had been doing these couple shows outside. And so we went, well, what about a speaker in a tree? And Christmas Carol came from, hey, it's Christmas time and we can't go see a show. So, but you can walk 6 people through a museum. What should we do? So yeah, so it's hard for me to conceive of like the idea of a theme park, which I'm like, yeah, I'd love to conceive of a theme park, but then to go, oh, well, it's about animals and it's about our interaction with nature. It doesn't quite work out for me in my mind that way. It's just like, yeah, I'd love to do a theme park, and when that time comes, we'll know what it's supposed to be.
And you're going to hire all of us, right?
And I'm going to hire all of you to do stuff.
Yeah.
Exactly.
We're going to use Lupin.
Exactly. Yeah.
That's awesome, man. Does anyone have any final questions for Joel or things that you want to bring up now that we have him here?
Oh, man, thanks a lot. It was really insightful, really great hearing what you've been doing, man.
Yeah, man.
I was going to say, Vancouver to me is funny because sometimes we have really awesome stuff and it's not always well communicated. Like in the media, sometimes I find out a show I just missed. It was last week where there was like the Christmas Carol thing.
Right.
I think really our goal as a creative tech community is to celebrate more of these projects that you're working on with your company or with EOS Light Media or with other companies that you're partnering with, and like kind of bring more attention to the creators of these things. Because I think that, themed attractions are the future. I think it's getting a bit ideological. I mean, not like political, but the idea of, the death of shopping malls that everybody's talking about, some way, like we are kind of seeing a resurgence of immersive spaces. Once COVID is more manageable, I feel like, the Nike store in New York or the Team Lab spaces, or, in Brooklyn, there's these, interactive spaces, pop-up museums, right? We're seeing them all over. And I think Vancouver is well positioned to kind of to be a leader in that area.
Well, it's interesting because I've been going around talking to some museums recently and to retail businesses, and they go, well, like, why do you think? And one of the questions is, why do you think that this is the future of how retail should work or museums should work? And I kind of go, it's like it's actually not the future. It's the right now. It's just not something we're really doing in Canada at scale. Like if you go to the US or you even go over to Europe, like there's so much everything is themed experience, and everything is designed to be interactive and immersive, and not everything, but like it's huge. I would actually so put on the reading list for everyone a book called The Immersive World's Handbook by Scott Lucas. He's actually got a number of books, and I would recommend all of them. But the Immersive World Handbook is really cool because it talks about, like, it kind of moves outside of theme parks and talks a bit more about, it talks about themed spaces in general, and the use of technology to communicate themed spaces. So, yeah.
I've been looking for a book like that. I think that'll be my summer read.
It's great.
I'm so psyched that you made my job so much easier.
Well, if you need a reading list, I've got a stack. So so hit me up. I could talk about themed attractions all day long.
Yeah, but if you lend them to me, you'll never get them back. So that's the
Yeah, as
problem.
well.
You ever read any Cory Doctorow?
Sorry?
Cory Doctorow? Do you ever read any?
I do. Yeah, I know Cory Doctorow.
I kind of figured. He a lot of his characters, he writes kind of weird sci-fi novels, but a lot of his characters are into making their own theme parks.
Yeah. Oh yeah. Oh, that's where. Boom. Yes, because he writes for Boing Boing. That's it.
Yeah.
Like I know. It's like I know the name is, but like, yeah. So yeah, I know him as a journalist rather than a writer. I didn't know he wrote books.
Yeah, down and out in the Magic Kingdom was all about like these immortal people kind of rebuilding Disney World in their own image. You'd love it.
Wow.
I think there's an opportunity for like a zombie outbreak movie set in a post-apocalyptic Disneyland, right? I mean,
well, look. I mean, everybody remembers what Banksy did. What was that? Was that 5 or 6 years ago now? Does everybody remember?
Yes,
Dismal
it was
Land?
like a black and white art film or something, right? What was it called?
No, there was. So he did a theme. So Banksy did a theme park that was called Dismal Land. Was it Dismal Land? Was it Land?
It's amazing.
Yeah, there it is, Dismal Land. There we go. It was a dystopian Disneyland theme park, and he did it up as like it was more installation-y than it was theme parky, but it still covered the bases.
I just posted a link for everyone. I have not heard of this, and Tim, why have you never told me about this?
This was like an expansion of the prank he did where he put like a dummy dressed up like a Guantanamo prisoner in one of the attractions and caused all kinds of red alerts and basically shut down Disneyland.
That was an exit through the gift shop, that faux documentary. Yeah. That's a really great topic, maybe for another discussion. But Joel, just quickly, what are your thoughts on companies like Meow Wolf and Banksy and ways that people are combining themed attractions with art, like traditional and conceptual art installations?
It's great. I love Meow Wolf stuff. So there's an organization called the Themed Entertainment Association, who I would love to see more Canadians be part of the Themed Entertainment Association. But I went down to a conference in 2013 and in New York, and they were like, and they were doing talks about like expanding the form, and they went, now there's some kids from San Diego that are doing this new thing called Meow Wolf, and they're gonna talk about it. So here they are, and yeah, it's amazing to see them kind of grow the form and make it and take it outside of the realm of like, because when you go to a theme park, you sort of know what you're getting into, and I love that they're taking the experience, and they're taking that and warping it and doing something new and exciting with it,
and also something kind of laced with irony. I mean, one of the exhibits was Omega Mart,
yes,
right? Which is sort of this.
Well, that's their
very
whole
tongue-in-cheek, surreal, anti-corporate.
Well, it's the whole concept of the Las Vegas one. What's interesting is the first Meow Wolf was a series of exhibitions, just so each artist gets a space, and then Omega Mart is all based around a single concept, which is neat.
Which is cool. I love the idea that you're in a presupposedly innocent shopping mall, but then there's all these spaces you can disappear into. One of them is actually Alex Gray and his wife created a gigantic, Alex Gray inspired acid trip room with these infinity mirrors and all this other kind of cool shit. And it really, like you said, it's challenging the traditional norms of what you expect in a theme park. And that's what people maybe are thirsty for now is curiosity. And also there's a tinge of kind of political questioning and authoritarianism and all these big themes that are starting to emerge. So have you been to House of the Eternal Returned?
I've not been to House of the Eternal Return. No.
Anybody here? No, pre-COVID, Santa Fe, New Mexico. I think it was an old bowling alley. Am I right? And then the story behind it is they had this like old, like they got George R.R. Martin, who happens to live in Santa Fe, to loan them like $1 million or a couple million to build the first iteration of this gigantic experience. Yeah. Like, what are the chances, right? That you run into a famous author that wants to bankroll you.
Well, and what's neat is they work as a collective. So they consider themselves an artist collective rather than a company, even as they've scaled. There's a documentary, and I'm trying to remember what the documentary is called, but there was a documentary about their founding that you can get from their website. That is just really interesting and insightful and fun to watch.
Well, I think this will have to be the topic of another meetup.
I think so.
Because there's so much to talk about. So thanks again, Joel, for joining us tonight. Thanks everyone for coming on this hot, hopefully the last super hot night of our summer. And the recording will be available on our YouTube page. If you enjoyed the meetup group, feel free to drop us a tip if you want on our PayPal account. Tim, I don't know if we have the link there again, but join us. I don't know, we may have a meetup next month, or we may take a break in the summer, but I don't know, maybe that's something we can discuss after the meetup group. Joel, you're welcome to join us again. And also, if anyone here wants to recommend a speaker or someone in the community that you'd like to, kind of learn more from, please don't hesitate to reach out to us and refer that person. So we'd love to have more artists and creators like Joel speaking with us. Cool. And without further ado, thanks everyone, and have a nice night.
Thank you, Joel.
Thank you. Thanks so much,
Brady. Thanks, Ove.
Thanks everyone.
Sam.
That was great.
Thank you. Bye bye.